I became a single teen mother at, I would just say 17, because I was basically doing it by myself. And after being in that relationship for 2.5 years, I am now by myself again.
A TikTok star is at the center of a chilling murder-for-hire investigation. Influencer Gabby Gonzalez and her dad, a Florida attorney, are accused of plotting to kill pop singer Jack Avery, who is the father of Gabby's young daughter. It's a case investigators say involves secret payments, undercover calls, and a shocking alleged plan to make the boy band singer disappear. We're on the case presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart.
I learned that I just need me. 5 years ago, being alone was like the worst thing that could have happened to me. And now being alone is the best.
You may know TikToker Gabby Gonzalez. She's built a huge following posting about motherhood, family life, and day-to-day moments with her daughter. But now Gabby Gonzalez and her father, Francisco Gonzalez, have both been arrested in a case police say involves an alleged murder-for-hire plot. And the alleged target was not a random person. According to investigators, the man they allegedly wanted dead was Jack Avery, the former Why Don't We singer and the dad of Gabby's 7-year-old daughter. Police documents claim Francisco Gonzalez, who is also a Florida attorney, allegedly told someone it would be, quote, cheaper if Jack Avery was dead. And investigators say the case did not stop at just words. These allegations also go back roughly 5 years to 2021. According to witness statements, bank records, and even an undercover FBI phone call, authorities believe there was an actual attempt to make a murder for hire on Jack Avery happen. Now, the details in this case, they are shocking, and we're going to break down the entire story, and it has wild allegations. Let's begin with Gabby Gonzalez and who she is. On TikTok, she presents herself as a young mom who is figuring out life. She has a 7-year-old daughter who she had when she was just 17 years old.
Through my journey in womanhood, I have used pretty much every period product under the sun. From when I first got my period when I was 13 until now as a grown adult who has had a child, who has had miscarriages, who has lost a baby in birth. So I've experienced the full spectrum of womanhood. Free bleeding has helped me become more in tune with my body, for one. Number two, period products are ridiculously expensive. Period products should be easily accessible for everyone who needs them. They're not, obviously, and the prices keep increasing. And then on top of it, there's chemicals being put inside of pretty much every single period product, even the organic ones. I have just come to the place in my life where I choose not to participate in it.
And she talks openly about womanhood, her body, and her struggles. And she's talked about being a single teen mom. That's the Gabby that her followers know or thought they knew. But according to law enforcement, there was another side to this story. And it reportedly starts with a vicious custody battle over her daughter, whose dad is Jack Avery. Now, he was a member of the boy band Why Don't We? Now, according to the arrest affidavit filed by the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office, there had been, quote, long-standing custody and visitation litigation between Gabby and Jack. And according to that same document, Gabby's dad, Francisco, became, quote, deeply involved. Witnesses described Francisco as heavily invested in the custody dispute and hostile toward Avery. One witness told investigators that Francisco said words to the effect that, quote, it would be cheaper if Avery were dead. That witness allegedly described the Gonzalez family as, quote, obsessed with obtaining full custody and excluding Avery from his child's life. But before any alleged talk of murder, the police report says Francisco was running a campaign against Avery. A detective wrote that text messages between Francisco and a private investigator show Francisco allegedly directing surveillance activity on Avery in Kauai, Hawaii. He sent photos and identifying details. He asked whether Avery was drinking, smoking, alone, or receiving assistance, anything that could be be used against Avery in court. In a separate communication reviewed by federal agents, Francisco allegedly discussed allegations that Avery had COVID. Remember, we're back in 2021 at this point. And he expressed an intent to have Avery arrested if he showed up for visitation and tried to involve a law enforcement contact. Investigators also reviewed family group communications. In one exchange from March 22nd, 2021, Francisco allegedly wrote, quote, "Call Barca never too early." According to the affidavit, investigators considered that significant because later evidence showed that Gabby Gonzalez, and a man who we cannot confirm has been arrested yet in this case, allegedly attempted to recruit that person, who authorities identify as someone named Dustin Barca, to threaten Avery. Now, of course, we don't have confirmation as of this recording that that man named Barca has been charged either in this case or whether he will be. So again, these allegations, they go back as far as 2021. This investigation has been going on for roughly 5 years. But throughout that time, Gabby has still been posting on TikTok as if nothing was going on.
Good morning, everyone. Between espresso, Not Like Us, and the Tortured Poets department, my brain is on something. It's just singing lyrics over and over and over. Isn't this the point? Isn't this the brainwashing? It's working. It's working. Oh my gosh, but Daddy, I love him. Okay, listen. So the first few rounds that I listened to this song, it was really giving gay anthem. I don't know why everyone cares so much about what boy each song is about. I don't care. I think it doesn't matter at the end of the day. But that song's a bop. I'd be bopping to it so hard.
According to the police report, the alleged plot was escalating. A witness told investigators that Gabby repeatedly said she wanted Jack Avery dead and discussed hiring a hitman. That witness stated that Gabby and another person talked about using the dark web and paying in Bitcoin. And the witness said to investigators, quote, "Francisco Gonzalez was the source of the money." The witness also stated the intended killing was discussed as occurring in Los Angeles and, quote, being made to look like a car accident. Another witness told investigators that Gabby said the proposed hitman had been paid to kill Avery and that Francisco paid approximately $10,000 for the hit. Then come the financial records in this case, and they're huge. According to the affidavit, on April 26th, 2021, Francisco Gonzalez made an outgoing payment of $10,000 to the alleged hitman through the payment app Square. Records show the money landing in the alleged hitman's account. Then the purported hitman moved two separate $5,000 sums into his Gemini cryptocurrency account on May 4th and May 6th of 2021. Then the next month, on June 5th of that year, the person police believe is the hitman reportedly sent Francisco a $4,000 invoice through his business. Police claim Francisco later paid that amount. The charge appeared in Francisco's subpoenaed bank records. This alleged hitman later told investigators he, quote, did not actually perform any web development services and believed the invoiced purpose was, quote, a cover. According to the police report, the alleged hitman stated during follow-up investigation that Francisco sent him money, quote, under the guise of web development payments, and that there had been no actual web development work. The alleged hitman also said he communicated with Francisco through encrypted signal messages and calls. But the most direct evidence, it appears, came from a federal agent posing as the killer. Federal agents say they reviewed a communication between the alleged hitman and someone listed as Fran G at a phone number tied to Francisco. Allegedly in that communication, Fran G sent the code word bull run, followed by a missed audio call. The alleged hitman responded that he would call later that night, and Fran G indicated he was available after 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Then federal agents reviewed a call involving Francisco Gonzalez and an undercover agent posing as a hitman. In that call, according to the affidavit that we have, Francisco used coded references, including bull run, and he referenced prior Bitcoin payment and discussed, quote, verifying the target and arranging payment after completion. Federal tracing materials showed that the alleged hitman funded cryptocurrency payments associated with the murder for hire request. According to TMZ, Gabby was arrested last week in Humboldt County, California, which is in the far north of California, as she was boarding a flight. She was then transferred to LA County, and that's where she is right now, being held without bond, according to online records from the LA County Sheriff's Department. She is set to be arraigned on the day we're recording this, Tuesday, for conspiracy to commit murder. Now, as for her dad, Francisco Gonzalez, he was arrested on the other side of the country in Seminole County, Florida. That's in the central part of the state on a warrant out of California. The Seminole County Sheriff's Office confirmed the arrest. Francisco remains behind bars in Florida after he waived his right to extradition to LA, so he is going to go to the West Coast. Now, here is something that we also want to add related to Jack Avery. It is something we found, and we think it's very notable. We found a podcast that Avery appeared on in September of 2025. It's the Zach Sang Show. And he tells this podcaster what sounded like at the time just a wild story, that two FBI agents showed up at his door, notifying him of a conspiracy, saying that someone, quote, hired someone to kill me. Now, we're not positive there's a connection there, but the timing is oddly coincidental. Jack Avery would not go into further detail about what the FBI said this conspiracy was about and who the person was who had allegedly hired someone to try and take his life. But we did find it very interesting that he also speaks very fondly of Gabby Gonzalez in this podcast, not in the way you would speak of someone who you believe could be trying to hire someone to take your life. So it's unclear if he knew that the FBI was also looking at Gabby as part of this alleged murder for hire plot. Joining us now to talk more about this case is former federal prosecutor and the president of West Coast Trial Lawyers, Nima Rahmani. Always great to have you here on Law and Crime. This investigation goes back to 2021, according to the court documents that we have. What do you make of that timeline?
Chris, thanks for having me as always. I'm not surprised. So what you want to do, especially for these murder for hire cases, or really any case where you're charging a conspiracy or a similar offense that hasn't been completed, you really want to make sure that you have everything lined up. Obviously, the last thing you want is for anyone to be murdered, or in the case of the recent attacks on some of the Jewish centers in New York, for anyone to actually be bombed. But you want enough evidence so when you go to a jury trial, you know that this wasn't just an exaggeration or something that was really preliminary, that you have a premeditated, concrete plan, and you have enough evidence to convict, which is, I think, what happened here.
And before we get to Gabby Gonzalez and what the case may look like against her, there's still a lot that we don't know at this point. Francisco Gonzalez, her father, it seems that law enforcement have the receipts, both figuratively and literally, here as far as some bank transactions that were made. It appears that there's some people who made statements as well that he discussed hiring a hitman. You certainly have an alleged motive based on just this custody dispute that's been going on for some period of time. What stands out to you about what the case may be for him, kind of the crux of it going forward, and proving, according to prosecutors, that he tried to hire a hitman or wanted to kill Jack Avery?
Yeah, it's not uncommon, obviously, for there to be violence or threats of violence when you're talking about a custody dispute. No one really matters to anyone who's watching than their own child. And, I could tell you, my wife, for instance, she represents foster kids. And I could tell you that some of those hearings in dependency court are nastier than the worst criminal case I have handled, where someone's going to go to prison for the rest of their life. I mean, you're taking someone's child away from them. So we've seen it time and time again where someone kills their spouse, their ex-spouse, or tries to do so because of custody. But we've also seen in some high-profile cases where, parents have gotten involved because, obviously they're the grandparent and they feel strongly too. Probably the Dan Markel case out of Florida, something we covered extensively here on Law and Crime, was probably the most recent, infamous example of that. But it's not uncommon for the grandparents or the parents of the spouse to be involved as well, which is what we're seeing here.
It's interesting because one of the alleged, people who are alleged to be a hitman or someone who he wanted to hire, in this case, they talk about $10,000, I think it is, that was given, paid approximately $10,000 for this alleged hit. And then you have a witness who says it was for some sort of like web development work that was never done. When you're building a case like this, the fact that you could prove as a prosecutor that, hey, the money went here, but it's not for what it was intended for. How does that factor into the story that you're going to tell to a jury if it even gets to that point?
So, Chris, these cases are primarily built in one of three ways, or usually all three. Obviously, wiretaps. If you have the defendant's own words, that's helpful, right? Text messages, recorded phone calls. Then, sort of the next best thing is an undercover. In this case, we have an FBI agent who is posing, someone that might help with this hit. The third, still helpful, but I think not as helpful as the other two, are cooperators, because you have people that might have a motivation to lie to save themselves. Sometimes they have their own criminal history. They can get impeached on cross-examination. But primarily because all this conduct really happens behind closed doors, those are the three ways that you build these types of cases. And to answer your first question, probably are the reason why it took so long to get here, years.
What happens over that period of time? Because for 5 years, if you have someone who is, willing to pay money to kill somebody, and then obviously this custody issue apparently was going on for such, a long period of time, like, what is law enforcement doing to make sure that this person doesn't actually go through with it?
Yeah, I mean, that's really the best question, right? I mean, we've seen it in other cases where law enforcement has taken too long and there's a killer or a potential killer loose. You and I, we've talked about the David case, for instance, right? Where, there's someone that was found dead, in September, and it took many, many months to make an arrest, and people were sort of critical. I think that's a valid criticism as well. Obviously, we want law enforcement to get it right. But if there's someone who is a potential killer out there, and you allow them to go through with a murder or a murder for hire, I mean, that's a huge problem if you're law enforcement. On the flip side, the delay can also help the defense. It allows them to argue, look, I was really upset. This is in the middle of a custody hearing. We were just exaggerating. There was no real plot to kill him. I just said, like, I hope he dies. And I can't wait for someone to kill him. Obviously, that's not the best position to be in if you're the defense, but if you can argue, hey, nothing really happened over the span of 5 years, that's certainly something that may resonate with the jury.
It's interesting because Gabby Gonzalez, she's obviously, for people who are on TikTok and kind of social media, she's one of those influencers that she has quite a following. And in the arrest documents that we have related to her dad, it seems like they are alleging that she was part of this conspiracy, that she wanted the father of her daughter dead and was going along. They're accusing her of going along with what her dad wanted to do here and paying the money, but it doesn't seem like she was the one who paid the money to do it. She may have said that she wanted it done, but it doesn't seem like, at least from what we have at this point, and we'll see what evidence comes out on her case in California, but it doesn't seem like they have the receipts that they do for her dad. What do you need to prove in cases like this when you're talking about conspiracy, that it's not just someone saying, like, yeah, I'd like the guy dead, but actually they wanted to go through with it?
Yeah, so for conspiracy, you have to prove a few things: an unlawful agreement between two or more people, and you have to prove an overt act, something really substantial in furtherance of that conspiracy, right? So obviously, any type of payment or attempted payment to a hitman, that's enough. But you're right. There's a very interesting potential dynamic here where you could have someone like Gabby, for instance, disclaim knowing anything and saying, look, this was all dad. And you can have some finger pointing there. And again, going back to that case that just got a lot of attention, a lot of folks were prosecuted, the Dan Markel case, you have in that case, the hitman, the mother of the spouse, the brother of the spouse, the girlfriend of the brother, everyone was prosecuted in that case except the spouse, who really had the most to gain from, the father being dead in a custody dispute. So it's certainly possible that some family members were calling the shots and were co-conspirators and Gabby didn't know. So it's going to be fascinating. Do they kind of present a united front here and say there was no conspiracy and this was exaggeration, no overt acts, defend it as a united front? Or does Gabby sort of point the finger at her father, which would be potentially, obviously something we've seen before, but certainly something where you would not have a united front, and that would be pretty damaging for her dad.
And I mean, there's so many stories we talk about where you do find yourself wondering with a suspect, like, how did you get to this point in your life where you would want to do this no matter the crime? But in cases of murder for hires that I've seen, it always seems like they're so difficult to go, and it's good that they don't often actually go through, but there's so many people that know of a conspiracy and people who could potentially go and talk to the police. Like in this document that we're looking through, there's like 2 or 3 witnesses. In one of them, they say that, he wanted it to look like a car accident. I mean, those specifics that come out, and it's like, if law enforcement has all of these people talking to them, like, as a prosecutor, I mean, how many different directions can you go? Because it just seems like it wasn't that big of a secret to people who were allegedly talking to the FBI.
I mean, no question, right? If you're talking to a stranger about a hit and that stranger turns out to be an FBI agent, you're certainly not the world's smartest criminal. But,
No.
We've seen it time and time again where people, they do stupid things and they create evidence to implicate themselves, right? And whether they're talking about a murder, they're talking about a hit to their friends, their loved ones, those are all potential witnesses. Look, and when the FBI shows up, people tend to talk. And that appears to be what happened here. You have members of their inner circle who are testifying to things like you said, that $10,000 payment, it was disguised as web services, but he was never a web developer, right? I mean, that was intended to disguise the source of the funds, right? Or you have someone who's an undercover, right? Or potentially you have more evidence. Obviously, look, we're pretty early on in the case, but I expect that, if you have someone arrested in another state held without bond, that there's a lot of evidence here and someone that's going to be extradited to California. And when you're talking about these sorts of conspiracies, at least under California law, you're looking at as much time as if the object of the conspiracy had been carried out. So these are 25 to life cases. They're very serious in California. Just because you don't actually pull the trigger and it's not attempted murder, I don't want people who are watching to think that a conspiracy charge has any less significance than that.
How, for a defense attorney, I mean, typically what is the approach in cases like this? Because I think of for Francisco Gonzalez, they're going to show these records. They're going to show the Bitcoin payments that they say that they have. They're going to show not just that there was the intent because of the custody dispute and statements that he made, but there seems to be, again, like those type of receipts. Like, how does a defense attorney look at this? If all of this is actually admissible and goes forward, like, how do you argue that away?
Yeah, Chris, I think you got to go one of 3 ways if you're Francisco. Again, I don't think you can point the finger at your daughter necessarily, although I guess anything's possible. But assuming you're just sort of defending this straight up, I think the first way you might do it is say that, there was no unlawful agreement, right? I mean, that's what you need for a conspiracy. It can't just be one person. So that's sort of one way to defend it. There's no agreement, right? Second, even if there is some sort of discussion, I think you try to pivot and say, look, it's just an exaggeration, right? This is a heated custody dispute, people who are out of state. And, when you don't see your kid, and we're talking about, 7-year-old, I mean, it drives people crazy. That doesn't mean they actually go intend to kill someone, right? And stage it as an accident or whatever the prosecution is alleging. Or, the third way, again, if you can't get to either of those 2, you sort of pivot and you kind of go all in and say, listen, this was entrapment. There was no real intention to do this until the government got involved and sort of coerced, someone in a vulnerable state to making a payment, right? So I think that's sort of the way you would defend it, 1, 2, 3, the agreement, exaggeration, and entrapment if you're the defense here.
Gabby's dad was arrested in Florida, making his first appearance, believe right about now, as we're recording this here on Tuesday. What's next in the process going forward as he's going to likely come back to California to face charges?
Yeah, what's next in the process is, extradition. So typically, really, the only issue in the Florida hearing is identity. Obviously, there's an arrest warrant. And under the full faith and credit clause of the Constitution, judges in other states have to honor those warrants. So really the question for the Florida judges is this Francisco Gonzalez the same person who's named in the California warrant? If so, then the governors will sign off on the extradition and, Francisco will be brought here to California, to Los Angeles County Superior Court, and he's going to face charges here.
How does that factor in with his daughter's case as well? Does that go on? Like, how does the timelines interact when you have 2 cases that are related but separate, it seems?
So the question is, are they going to be joined or they're going to be severed? Typically, the defense will ask for severance, especially in Gabby's case, right? You may have inconsistent defenses here. The prosecution loves to try both of them together helps dirty them up, and brings in more evidence to the case. And it's going to be harder for jurors to potentially, acquit both of them. They may convict at least one. So typically the prosecution does like to join these cases and the defense likes to have them severed. Usually, especially for these serious crimes, judges will sever the cases, allow them to be heard separately, because if there's any prejudice to the defendant under the Sixth Amendment, you want to kind of err on the side of caution, especially a case like this that will likely move forward and end up on appeal.
Yeah, and we'll see what happens next. Obviously, some shocking allegations coming in involving some people who are pretty prominent in the world of music and social media. Former federal prosecutor, president of West Coast Trial Lawyers, Nima Rahmani. Always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for joining us today to talk about this one.
Thanks for having me, Chris. Hope to be on again real soon.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify, and we're also now streaming on Peacock. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.